And welcome to the midweek brief. My name's Anthony, and on behalf of FP Markets, thank you for attending. Thank you for viewing. Please like and subscribe. It means a lot to us, so we can continue doing more of these videos for you. As always, the whole point of these videos is just to bring you up to speed with the most important news of the week, the news that is likely to affect the markets and what they will affect. It's also designed to try and get to the point of the news rather than opinions, which do not help as a trader. Before we proceed, as always, please have a look at our Traders Hub. It's there for all account holders. It's got everything you need, educational material, market analysis, fundamental analysis like this with regarding the news. We've got calendars, calculators, videos, everything you need is all there to get you sorted. In terms of today, today is obviously a public holiday. It's May Day for most of the world, and traditionally this day is a day of protests. Originally, I'm sure most people will be relaxing at home, maybe even a barbecue or two. But traditionally, this is a day for protests. And growing up, it was usually the day that you would see people protesting regarding different subjects or topics in the community. However, nowadays, it tends to be a day that is in regards to protests regarding the Palestine-Israel situation. So to start it, we may have heard on the news regarding Columbia University. It's not just Columbia University. This is happening in universities across the United States. It primarily started at Columbia University. The ironic thing is Columbia University has a huge Jewish investment and is actually opening up a sister university in Tel Aviv. Strange because most of the people attending this university seem to be involved in the protests. Now, we call them protests. The reason that the police have got so heavily involved is that they've evolved from protests into occupations. We're seeing occupation of the public parks and squares within the university campus. We're now seeing certain buildings being occupied by the protesters. They have come out, the police, and they've started arresting quite a few people. They've already said around 30 to 40 people have been removed from the Manhattan University's Hamilton Hall. This number has grown as well in the past 24 hours. Is this something that is going to affect the dollar? Not necessarily, not overnight, but this is an ongoing situation which relates to everything that seems to be going on in the world now. So this is definitely something that could contribute towards gold and the dollar in the not for so far foreseeable future. So things are heating up there. There has been talk of National Guard being implemented. However, local governors have said that is not the case. It doesn't need to get that far at the moment. So what they have done, which is probably the most peaceful and sensible option here, is they've already threatened to expel students occupying campus building. This has already begun overnight. Some saying it's controversial. People are allowed their free speech. Of course, anyone's allowed free speech, but as you may have heard, free speech doesn't mean you're free from consequence. At the end of the day, this is a university. It's encouraged to debate and have political thinking, but it does not mean that you can occupy buildings, fight with police, burn things, and also stop other students attending, students who have paid or have massive student debts and now cannot go and attend lectures. So there has to be a middle ground. Of course, people have the right to protest. I encourage that to a point. We've seen protests going on in Europe over the past 6 months, but yes, there's been some scuffles, there's been some, arrests made, but we've not seen it to the point where buildings are necessarily being occupied. Therefore, we would expect a much heavier-handed response. So that's the current situation with Columbia University. It's spreading in America. We've seen anti-Semitism cases increase. We've seen anti-Islamic cases increased, although it does seem that the anti-Semitic cases are increasing at an alarming rate. This is a very divisive subject, so we try to just stick to the facts of what's going on rather than be opinionated. If traders were always to trade based on their opinion, it would not be good for risk management. So we try to trade off of facts, regardless how you feel about them. Why are the pro-Palestinian students wearing masks on campus? This is another interesting one. Well, it's purely just to hide their identity. I don't think they're necessarily doing it for health benefits. But it does raise a question which links to another topic, which I heard the other day, which was a lot of these tents that are occupying the sites are uniforms. They're coming from a source. There seems to be money behind these protests. And we've seen this before in the past with the Black Lives Matter movement. We've seen it with Trump rallies. There always seems to be some organization behind it, funding it, paying for the equipment, paying for the flags. And it's very much the case here. So this is basically a civil proxy war, if you want to put it that way. So a proxy war, we know, for example, Israel, Iran have groups like Hezbollah and the Yemeni rebels and Hamas, obviously. This is no different. This is obviously political parties within America supporting different activist groups, if you want to put it that way, or people with different beliefs, and funded them to fight off one another. Kind of the old divide and conquer routine. That seems to be the truth of the matter here, because it seems very organized and very well equipped. And we've seen this not just with the pro-Palestine, but with plenty of other marches of different topics over the past decade or so. If we actually go on to the Israel-Palestine, the major development in the region is violence is still continuing, but does seem to be slowing down. Reason being is at the beginning of the week, it was Monday, a fourth ceasefire talks were held. It apparently, according again to Egyptian, especially the American authorities and independent journalists who have read what the agreement had, it seems to be the most generous, if you want to say generous is the right word, but at least the most fair, perhaps, deal on the table. In a nutshell, it basically says there'll be the complete withdrawal of IDF forces. They will not go into Rafah in the south here, where most of the refugees currently are. But they would allow humanitarian corridors to open completely up. All they want is they want their hostages back, but to be done in stages to build trust with the Palestinian authorities. They will release Palestinian prisoners in return for hostages, and it's actually quite a generous deal. We're talking about hundreds, if not thousands, of Palestinian prisoners in return for 133 hostages, which again is not going down too well with people in Israel, but it seems a plausible way to get to end the violence. But it does require the withdrawal of Hamas. Now, bearing in mind, the Hamas leader is currently based in Qatar and is not even in Gaza. If he was in West Bank, I would understand, but he's not. He's not even in Egypt, because Egypt won't hold him. So the cards are on the table. It's up to Hamas now. It really is. If they refuse this ceasefire because they've yet to come back, it's been 2 days now. If they reject this, then it is likely that Israel will go full force into Rafah, and we're going to see more deaths occur, which is not good. And this is likely to push gold up as well. It's not just gold, it's also oil in the region. Saudi Arabia, a big producer of oil, who are very much trying to strike business with Israel. They were before this conflict, and some may argue that is reason why this conflict may have started, although that is classed purely as just conspiracy theory for now, and we can't trade off of that, of course. So the situation is we're waiting to hear back from Hamas regarding the ceasefire. Regardless of your opinion on the matter, if a deal is struck, then it will be good for security in the region. It will be able to bring a bit of stability to certain commodities. We're likely to see gold go down. As we can see, gold has gone down over the past, let's say, week or so. Some may say it's just correcting itself, of course, because nothing can go up forever. It has to come down at some point and maybe go up again. But this is very much a case of people's eyes will be on the protest in America, elections coming up, and certainly a ceasefire deal out of Israel, the Gaza situation. So keep an eye on that. It'll be interesting to see. As you can see here, hopes rise for new talks on Gaza ceasefire as Israel scales back demands. So Israel are actually bending quite a lot. Like I said, they're not really asking for anything too unreasonable. They've also offered compensation. They will help rebuild Gaza financially after. That was something that was mentioned in previous ceasefire deals. Hamas are now in a situation, if they reject this, then it's pretty evident, not just to the world, but probably to the Palestinian people, that they have no interest in any peace at all, that they want the area to be sucked into a massive conflict vacuum. It seems evident now that is probably the case. Hopefully they can strike a deal and withdraw. Israel are not asking for their heads on a plate. They're not even asking for names. They're just asking for Hamas one last time, withdraw. You're not going to control Gaza after this. They will implement a new political system, and also it will be Middle East partners who will police it. So it's not going to be IDF forces in Gaza, or very limited. It will be a combination of UN forces along with, let's say, maybe Egyptian forces, Jordanian forces, something more familiar to the local population in terms of tradition, culture, and religion. So all eyes will be on this situation as it unfolds. If we move on to the next subject, which will be the Ukraine situation, we're seeing attacks still within Russia, mostly around the Belgorod region. We've seen an oil refinery overnight, well, early hours of this morning be hit, which has caused a massive fire. It seems that Ukraine, because of due to losses and the size of their army now, it looks like this is going to evolve very much into a guerrilla style war along the lines of Afghanistan, Vietnam, these types of conflicts. The reason being is because you can only hold the line as long as you have enough soldiers. Ukraine's losing its soldiers. They're now trying to conscript people of younger age and older age. Is it a sign of desperation? Of course, but it's also an evolution into guerrilla warfare. So this is why we're seeing more attacks on Russian supply lines, on Russian soil, and usually for countries like Russia, or let's say larger countries with larger armies, especially Europe, for example, and America, getting sucked into a guerrilla war is a very hard one. We've seen it with Afghanistan, Vietnam. These wars are not over within a few years. They can go on for decades, and usually no one ever wins or loses. It becomes a stalemate and someone withdraws, and then it doesn't happen again, usually. This is very much what seems to be happening in Ukraine. At the moment, it's very much World War I style tactics with trenches, but it looks like that's going to evolve. The Russians still have a massive force and actually managed to do a surprise attack the other night and gain 6 kilometers. It sounds significant. 6 kilometers is in a war like this, but it's still just 6 kilometers when you're talking about Europe's largest mainland country, which is Ukraine, and it's the breadbasket of Europe and parts of the world. So 6 kilometers is not big in a grand scheme, but this is the summer period, and this is when every kilometer counts, because once September, October comes, and the rain season starts and the winter season in Ukraine, then everything goes on pause. So this would explain why we've had over $100 billion worth of aid granted out of Europe and the United States mostly to Ukraine to help them get through the summer so they can regroup and plan the next move, probably a counteract over the winter period into spring next year. Again, this is just showing signs that the war is likely to continue, affecting commodities, affecting products like wheat and soya. People forget about that, but they're all tradable. And this is very much a subject, a topic, a situation that will affect that and already has. If we go on to the explosions of Russian oil refinery. So, like I said, they're trying to hit Russia in their pockets because of the oil and gas as well. It's also to send a message. They keep doing it on Russian soil to kind of send a message to the Russian people that this is still going on. Do not forget about it. We can still hurt you where it's close to home. Like I said, it's evolved into a guerrilla war. So that's the current situation in Ukraine there. If we go on to economic events for this week and have a look at the currencies, most of the eyes will be on the US dollar. We're seeing ADP employment change out today. This is a precursor to the NFP on Friday, so this is a good one to pay attention to. And if you're heavily into the events, then you can do your studies based off of this, the figures that come out. We've got manufacturing rates coming out of the United States, and we've got the federal interest rate decision later today as well. They expect it to be the same, and I believe, and I'll touch on this in a moment, a lot of it again is eyes looking elsewhere. They keep saying that they want more proof of inflation. It's a very delicate thing to say because, okay, the American general public, and most of them are not going to be sitting there watching these press conferences. Traders will, and traders understand how inflation works. But what American people need to hear, just like people around the world, is what do you mean proof of inflation? As I've mentioned before, getting proof of inflation is not a hard thing. You go to your local supermarket and you see what you were paying for something now compared to what you were paying a year or 2 years ago or pre 27 times. Inflation's a real thing. So what I think is likely here is they're buying time. But buying time in what context? I think they're holding out to see what the Bank of England do. Why? Bank of England, most of the world's money flows through it anyway. It's also got a lot of credibility. We're talking about a small country, Britain, with a very strong currency. And people will be watching to see which direction they take. And there's pressure on them to cut interest rates. Why? Quite simply, a lot of it is to do with the housing market in the UK. People can't afford the properties. And it's not just UK now. This is the same situation in a lot of countries. If the interest rate is too high, it means people are going to be paying back more in their mortgages, aka loans. Then it becomes unappealing. Then people start thinking, is it really worth buying? If I'm buying a house for £300,000 or £200,000, but I'm paying interest back of 30, 40, £50,000, is it really worth it? However, if the interest rate is too low, then the banks are not going to loan the money. So again, it's a balancing act. So there are calls for it to reduce. Why? Because the UK has got a problem now where they fear that people are not going to be buying houses because of the interest rate. If people are not buying them, it means the cost of housing will come down. That sounds great. But in the long term, it's not so much, because you want your assets to grow in value. That's how countries grow. That's how their economies grow. So housing situation out of the UK, it would make sense that the Americans, Canadians, Australians are likely to sit back and see what decision the Bank of England makes, and then they will make their own, which, going back to Canada, makes sense, because if we look at the interest rate decision, its previous was 5.5% and it's forecast to be 5.5%. And due to what Jerome Powell's been saying over the past few days and weeks, it looks like this is not going to change anytime soon, maybe over coming weeks and months, but certainly not today. However, you never know, there might be a nice surprise. If we look what's coming over the coming days, we've got inflation rates coming out. That goes back to what I've said. Building permits is exactly what I've just mentioned, and core inflation rates as well. This is out of different regions. We've got Australia here, Australian dollar, US dollar, Japanese yen, consumer confidence out of Japan. So although the US dollar is a lot of play here, there's a nice diverse range of currencies to be traded. We've got Swiss franc here, unemployment rates too. All in build up to the NFP on Friday. And if I just bring it up here, we got unemployment rates too, but the NFP is coming out on Friday. It's the big one of the week. US dollar, good pair that is usually looked at here, as mentioned, Euro USD, but also USD CAD is always a good one, because you also have data traditionally that comes out. Not every NFP, but some NFPs, USD CAD, because they're neighbors, it can move. And sometimes Canada has data coming out around the same time, if not at the same time, which can make the NFP move in even more dramatic fashion. We're also seeing traders come back to these events. People are starting to have a bit more confidence trading them. So it's definitely something to look into. But why NFP? The forecast is always down recently, and it's hard to predict these numbers more so. Now, there's many theories why this is possible. But yes, it is true. The forecasts tend to be worse nowadays than they were, let's say, a decade ago or 2 decades ago when I started in the industry. And I think a lot of it to do, especially out of America, is false information. Now, not intentionally false information, but false information in the aspect that they've got high migration figures. It's nearly 11 million illegal migrants in the United States. I do have the figures just popping up here. It's 10.3 or something million. The point being is, the more illegal migrants you have in a country, regardless if it's the States and regardless where they come from, it's going to affect things like unemployment rates and figures. Because you might be thinking, okay, it makes sense for the employment figures to be going up as the population grows. But why are they going down? Well, those are registered jobs. Those are official jobs that are registered for tax and, national insurance or social insurance, whatever it is the relative country has. But if everyone's, if you've got 11 million migrants, that's 3%, just nearly 3 to 4% of the American population are illegal, then for sure it's going to have an effect on unemployment figures out of that country. We're going to get false readings. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Take it into consideration, not with just this NFP, but upcoming ones. If we keep seeing that they're getting the consensus wrong, then it definitely makes sense to start looking into unemployment rates a bit as well. To wrap everything up, I just wanted to quickly touch on a couple of stocks. First one being Lockheed Martin. Why? Well, as this aid package was approved to Ukraine and arms sales to Israel are still approved and ongoing, Lockheed Martin are a big producer of missile and defense systems. It is likely to see that their shares will probably go up, especially over the coming months, over the summer period. Now, it's not just that, they also have a backlog from other countries. We're seeing deals being struck in the Middle East. And there's 40-year backlogs of tanks and missiles, defense systems. So Lockheed Martin's stable. It's got a lot of work. It's got decades worth of orders to fulfill. Next one would be Tesla. And the reason being is Tesla's very important at the moment in terms of we had the earnings come out, but about a week ago they did announce some new products which did kind of save them because they had an issue letting 10% of their global workforce go, and this raised the share price. But we have a lot of internal civil war going on at the moment. We've got the shareholders and Elon Musk. Elon Musk believes in quality over quantity. He wanted less staff but to increase their pay and increase production that way. That's debatable. That is not the issue here, but the shareholders believe that's a sign of regression and that he should be hiring more people and opening up more premises around the world. This, is debatable. Either way, when you see shareholders and, Elon Musk, the owner of the company or the major shareholder of the company, and they're disputing about what way the company goes forward, it doesn't look good for the company or any company. So definitely one to keep an eye on over the coming weeks and months and see how that story unfolds. Apart from that, I appreciate your time. It will be the same time again next week. Please like and subscribe. Any questions you have, please just drop them in the comments box. Thank you very much. Have a good day.